have further discussions, reviewing the evidence, and speaking freely amongst the jurors, we are still unable to reach a unanimous decision. So at this time, what I am going to do is just declare mistrial. The case was mistried.
After a shocking mistrial in the case against rapper YNW Melly, a Florida judge has finally set a date for his highly anticipated retrial. The Florida rapper was back in court Tuesday for a status hearing, where a judge set his double murder retrial for September of 2025. YNW Melly, whose real name is Jamell Demons, is accused of shooting his friends Christopher Thomas Jr., a.k.a. YNW Juvie, and Anthony Williams, a.k.a. YNW Sack Chaser, in October of 2018, and staging the shooting to appear as a drive-by shooting. This week's hearing was held at the request of Melly's defense to address outstanding motions. According to the defense, the state had more than enough time to respond to their motions, but the prosecution argued they needed a more thorough breakdown of the specific filings to respond. At the end, both sides agreed to a January hearing where Judge Martin Feen will address all of the pending motions in the case. So how did we get here? The rapper's career came crashing down when he was arrested in February of 2019 and charged with murdering his childhood friends YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser. According to the state, the Florida rapper and his friends were riding in a Jeep driven by Melly's co-defendant, Cortland Henry, a.k.a. YNW Bortland, after a recording session in Fort Lauderdale on that fatal night of October 26, 2018. According to prosecutors, Melly and Bortland worked together to stage the drive-by shooting, but the two will be tried separately.
Detectives know they have a Jeep that they are looking at the Memorial Miramar Hospital that has 16 easily identifiable bullet defects, that has a broken out rear view window and 2 broken side windows on the passenger side. Things aren't adding up. So detectives work backwards. They are then able to determine that 805 Northeast 4th address, that it's a recording studio, and that the recording studio is equipped with cameras. And ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see footage from both inside and outside of that recording studio. You're going to learn that on the morning of the 26th at approximately 1 p.m., detectives went out to the recording studio to try and see if somebody had followed the victims, to find out how they knew where they were going to be to set up this drive-by. In the video, that is the first time detectives learned that there was actually 4 people in that gray Jeep, and that the defendant, Jamell Demons, is in the rear driver's side seat. So let me set the scene for you at the recording studio, because there's actually 8 young men there. You're going to hear they arrived at the recording studio. Not much was getting done. They were tired. They left at 3:19, and they got into 2 vehicles. So first vehicle is a red Mitsubishi SUV. In that red Mitsubishi SUV, 4 individuals get into it. Travion Glass, Dontavius Withers, Jacoby Mills, and Adrian Davis. They are in the red Mitsubishi. In the gray Jeep, you have the driver, Cortland Henry, rear driver's side passenger, Jamell Demons, Anthony Williams in the front seat, and Cortland Henry, again, the driver, Christopher Thomas in the rear. One person says, oh, it's at this location. One person says it's over here on the side of the road. Look at what the physical evidence shows, and that's what I would suggest to you is the most reliable things. So on the physical evidence, the Jeep is towed to the Miramar substation, and a search warrant is executed on it. And at that point, officers, crime scene technicians, and investigators start going through the contents of the Jeep. And all of the ballistic from the drive-by are all coming from the passenger side in towards the driver's side. And then from the rear of the vehicle, forward towards the front. The medical examiner's office is also conducting an investigation. You're going to hear testimony about the autopsies that were conducted on Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas. And this is when the suspicion, the investigation takes a turn. Because at that point, the fatal wounds for Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams are coming from inside the vehicle, from the rear driver's side passenger going out towards the passenger side. The other interesting thing the medical examiner's office is going to tell you is that when the drive-by was staged at 4:02 a.m., the victims were already dead. The medical examiner will be able to testify and tell you that the fatal shots to Anthony Williams, to his head, that enters in the back of his head and exits at the top, blowing out the front passenger window, was fatal. And that the additional wounds that are consistent with the trajectories going through the vehicle, he's already dead. They are post-mortem inflicted gunshot wounds. The same for Christopher Thomas. You will hear from the medical examiners, Dr. McDougall and Dr. Souter, who conducted the autopsies, that Christopher Thomas was shot in his left cheek. That was the fatal shot for him. You're also going to hear about stippling. Stippling is unburnt gunpowder that's ejected from the front of a firearm when a bullet is fired. So that is the same principle that comes to gunshot residue and the powder tattooing that you're going to hear about, the stippling. The bullet travels the furthest. The gunshot residue, the powder tattooing, the stippling, creates a pattern. And from that pattern, the medical examiner's office can give an approximate distance. Why can they not give an exact one? Because their firearm in this case was never recovered. Law enforcement made diligent efforts to go and dive multiple canals, search multiple areas, apartments, storage units. They were never able to find the firearm. So without the actual firearm that was used in this case, you can't accurately and reliably recreate a distance determination. Common sense, ladies and gentlemen. The things that you learned in elementary school science about conducting science experiments, they apply just as much now as they did then. You have to minimize the number of variables. That's the only way to get an accurate experiment. So if you don't know the type of gun, you can't minimize the variables to get that distance determination. So what you're also going to hear is while law enforcement is going through that Jeep, they find one spent shell casing for a .40 caliber firearm. Why is that important? That shows a gun was fired inside of that car. You're going to hear that at once the location of US 27 and Pembroke Road was discovered, law enforcement goes out to that area as well. And there they locate an additional 8 shell casings, .40 caliber. But the interesting thing about that doesn't happen on October 26th of 2018. This happens on November 21st, almost a month later. Because that's when law enforcement gets the reliable cell phone tracking data that they use to determine that's the area that they need to be searching. Because at that location is where the cell phones of Christopher Thomas, Anthony Williams, and Jamell Demons all line up at 4:02 a.m. That point, afterwards, Mr. Demons' phone tracks with the 2 victims until about 4:20. So 15 minutes before Cortland Henry takes the victims to the hospital. During those 30 minutes, you're going to hear as to where the path went. You're going to hear that law enforcement then searched that path again looking for trace evidence, such as firearms. They didn't find it. But you're also going to hear that Jamell Demons, on the side of the road, made a FaceTime video chat. At that point, he starts setting up the story. He FaceTimes his girlfriend at the time, Mariah Hamilton. Mariah Hamilton gets the phone call and screams, waking up her mother, Felicia Holmes. Felicia Holmes also sees the defendant, Jamell Demons, on that FaceTime video call. And you're going to learn, ladies and gentlemen, that that's a data event on a cell phone. So, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I have to prove is the defendant committed the crime. And to do that, the state intends to show the evidence that the phone was there at the murder scene. And there were no other phones there. There is no one else out there at 4 in the morning. You'll see in the messages and the contents of those messages him identifying himself. This is Melly, giving out that phone number to multiple people as being his phone number, 772-713-9807. And to further prove that, the state is going to show you the Instagram, the Facebook, the Snapchat. Because contrary to popular belief, Snapchat doesn't disappear. And detectives were able to write a search warrant and get contents of Snapchat. And there are things that are there, and there are things that are not. And so, ladies and gentlemen, specifically, the Instagram, the defendant, during the course of the months of October of 2018 through December of 2018, gives out his phone number 15 times. Says, "This is me," and all during the same time frame of October 26th of 2018, he's giving out that phone number. So one of the other elements that you heard about initially was that this was committed by a criminal gang member in furtherance of a criminal gang. So what you will learn from the evidence, from the Instagram, from the private messages, was that Jamell Demons is a member of the G Shine blood set. This is not a stage personality. This is not an actor that's playing a character. This was his real life. Ladies and gentlemen, you will see that as soon as October 24th, 2 days before the homicide, Jamell Demons is learning the oath of loyalty to the G Shine blood set. You're going to see things in these messages that will be indicative of blood membership. For example, anytime a word would normally be spelled with a C, as in Charlie, they don't use that. They replace it with the letter B. So instead of saying, "I'm at the crib," they say, "I'm at the brib." Why, ladies and gentlemen? Because C is associated with cribs. B is for bloods. So if you look through all the messages, you will notice time and time again, Jamell Demons is dropping C's and using B's. And you're going to see pictures, you're going to see videos of the defendant doing something called stacking, which is a way to show a gang affiliation and to broadcast it to the world. And this is not just in music videos. This is not just in lyrics, because we're not going to get into that. That's artistic expression. That's not why we are here today. We are here because the defendant murdered 2 individuals. So in summary, the last thing I want to tell you that the evidence will show is that in the Instagram, because the defendant had a moderate social media following at the time of these events, people are reaching out to him. Some fans, some friends, some associates. You'll see on October 26th, after about 8 a.m. in the morning, Eastern time, multiple messages are coming in. Messages are coming in from individuals checking to see if he's okay, if he's been injured in this drive-by. If it's true that Anthony Williams, who's also sometimes referred to as Sack, and Chris Thomas, who is referred to as Juvie, are really dead. One individual, and specifically, sends out, and I want to quote the message exactly that you will hear, and says, right after this, "Yo, homie, you good? Let me know something." And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is where context matters. What does that mean? If you work at Google and you say, "My whole floor is coding," that's a good thing. If you work at Broward General Hospital and you say, "My whole floor is coding," that is a bad thing. The context around the messages matters. So in the context of this message, this individual is reaching out, asking if Mr. Demons is good after he's been tagged in multiple social media posts about this drive-through, this shooting. And Mr. Demons responds very succinctly, "I did that. Shh." Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of the evidence, the state is confident that you will find the defendant guilty as charged of the first-degree murder of Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams. Thank you.
But for the defense, when it came time for their opening statement, they claim Melly had no reason to shoot his friends.
Prosecutors are given great power, endless resources to perform their mission of pursuing justice. But that's not what occurred here. What they will bring you is a case that is riddled with reasonable doubt, that is founded on an incompetent and incomplete investigation, and the exercise of poor judgment at every turn. The state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt the allegations that they have made. And there is a reason for that. You recall Ms. Bradley, some of you may recall, during jury selection, going to great lengths to let you know that she does not have to prove motive. And she's right about that. The law doesn't require her to prove motive. But you know what does require motive? A young man to wake up one day and decide that he's going to kill two of his best friends. Best friends that he grew up with, best friends that he hangs out with, best friends who he lives with, best friends whose careers he was trying to launch alongside his own. They have no reason for why he would do this, because there is no reason. And if there's no reason, it doesn't make sense. And if after 4 years of investigation, the state comes and says, "Hey, he killed two of his friends, his best friends," and you're wondering why, and their answer is, "Oh, I don't know," that's the first indication that they're just guessing and don't know what they're talking about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, by itself is reasonable doubt. Why he would commit such a heinous crime against his own two best friends for no reason. What happened here is that the lead detective, Detective Moretti, saw a video of Mr. Demons getting into a car 40 plus minutes before bodies were found in that car. And then he discovered that Mr. Demons was a rising star. And from that point on, he decided he's the only person that could have committed this crime. Because if you're involved in prosecuting a star, you become a star. This was his big break. And he had tunnel vision, and he zeroed in on this person, this young man, as the only possible perpetrator of that crime, to the exclusion of all other leads and evidence. There's a difference between cases that are investigated and cases that are fabricated. When a case is investigated, the state uses all its resources, its investigators, its experts, and all its energy to identify leads and run them to ground. That's what occurred here, and there's a reason why I say that. There are a number of leads that you will discover that were identified by the officers but were either completely ignored or given short shrift. I'm going to let you know, run through a few of them by way of example. Start with the most obvious one. Cortland Henry. Now, Ms. Bradley started her opening statement by describing some of the lies that he told, as though to impute them to Mr. Demons. Those were not Mr. Demons' lies, those were his lies. Cortland Henry shows up at Memorial Hospital, Miramar. You don't see him sitting there, but where you will see him sitting is in the driver's seat of a car with two dead bodies, a car riddled with bullets. And when he shows up with a change of clothing, change of shirt, gunpowder residue on his hands, evidencing that he had discharged a firearm. And he lies. He lies about where the incident occurred. He lies about how it occurred. And he lies about not having a phone. I think it was Miss Bradley herself who said, everybody has a phone in his pocket. Not Cortland Henry. There were 3 phones in that car. There were 3 people in that car. So they take him at his word, despite suspicious circumstances, and they let him go on his way. They soon discover that he's lying about the location of this incident, and they went back to him, and they labeled him a victim. And they said, we know you're scared. Tell us what happened. He lies to them again. They let him go. And they know where he went. They know the location that he went. They know the house that he went to right after. And any investigator worth his salt would have thought to maybe execute a search warrant on that location to see if you find any bloody clothes, any DNA, any blood, a weapon maybe. They don't follow leads. They have no motive. Investigation was botched. Investigation, as a matter of fact, is still going on as we speak, up to a couple months ago. Yet they're here telling you they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt and what you're still investigating for. The job of the state is to prove it beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And if you're a reasonable person and you have doubt, that's reasonable doubt. There's a song called Things That Make You Go, If you say that's reasonable doubt. You do not Bradley is charming. She's good at her job in some respects. But this is not a popularity contest. We don't give, hey, good effort. We don't give participation awards. This man's life is hanging in the balance. And if there is a scintilla of reasonable doubt, you must have the courage to speak up and say so. You're not here to judge him. You're here to judge the sufficiency of their case. They have a big task in front of them. We should probably get to it.
With no murder weapon or eyewitnesses to the double murders, prosecutors called on a crime scene reconstruction expert to piece together the clues.
The firearm had to have been in line with the backseat driver passenger.
Who was sitting in that seat at the time of this homicide?
That would be Mr. Demons.
Okay. Who was sitting in that seat at the time of this homicide?
That would be Mr. Demons.
Okay. And how can you say that?
Can we approach? Sure.
Can you say the length of time between the fatal shots and then the staged drive-by shots later on?
It was enough time for the heart to stop beating.
According to the state, Melly confessed to the murders to Sack Chaser and Juvie in a shocking text message.
His response was, "I did that," and placed a smiley face emoji. After that, SHHHH.
Melly chose not to testify in his first trial, and as his defense team claims he couldn't have been the shooter because he didn't learn of the murders until hours after it happened, they called his friend Adrian Davis to the stand.
Did there come a time in the early morning hours that you were woken up and heard some distressing news?
Yes.
What did you hear?
The second Julie was shot.
When you heard that, did you see Melly in the house?
Yes.
Did you see Melly how he was dressed in the house?
Yes.
What was he wearing?
Shorts and a t-shirt, I think.
Okay. Upon hearing that Sack and Juvie, and I really should use the correct names, Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas, were shot, what did you guys do?
We were already dressed and stuff, so we just left Fredo's house.
Was anybody upset or crying?
Yeah, we all were crying.
Was this young man crying?
Yes.
After 3 days of deliberations, the Florida jury couldn't come to a verdict.
The jury inquiry form, it indicates that after further discussions, reviewing the evidence and speaking freely amongst the jurors, we are still unable to reach a unanimous decision. So at this time, what I'm going to do is just declare mistrial because it's mistrial.
But the road to retrial has been anything but smooth sailing for either side after several delays. Then more twists in the case. The lead prosecutor, Christine Bradley, was yanked off the case. In September of 2023, Melly's defense filed a motion to dismiss the case, claiming the prosecution withheld key evidence regarding lead detective Mark Moretti. According to court documents, the rapper's defense team alleged the prosecution didn't disclose Moretti performed an illegal search warrant when he confiscated the phone of Melly's mother, Jamie King, as evidence due to the search occurring outside of his jurisdiction. He was also accused by the defense of using excessive force to confiscate the phone. And it all came to a head when Broward County Assistant State Attorney Michelle Boudreaux testified in a hearing she overheard Moretti ask a deputy to lie about being present during his execution of the warrant.
At that point in time, Detective Moretti was on the other side. He brushed against Mr. Trackman, and not intentionally, but eventually was able to get the phone from Miss King.
Physically took it from her.
He physically took it from her.
And during that, she let out a yell or an exclamation of pain.
Yeah, she yelled. She yelled.
Okay. And then what happened?
After that happened, he retrieved the phone. Ms. King and Mr. Trackman left the room. Upon leaving the room, probably within maybe 2 minutes at the most, Deputy Burrell came into the room.
Was he in the room when the warrant was served?
He was not.
Was there any BSO deputy in the room when it was served?
There was not.
Was there anyone in the room authorized to serve a warrant in the courthouse in the room?
There was not.
So-
If it had been exigent, then yes. But there was no exigent circumstances until Detective Moretti created the exigency.
Okay, so he could have waited for a deputy to come before he decided to serve.
Correct.
Or he could have waited for the statement to be over, and as they were leaving, serve.
Correct.
Okay. And he chose the time and place and manner of how to serve.
Correct.
Okay, so after Deputy Durrell comes in, what happened?
After Deputy Burrell came in, Detective Moretti looked at him and said, "You need to say you were here when I served that search warrant."
This is important. Are you sure it was Detective Moretti that made that statement?
I'm 1,000,000% sure. 1,000%.
Then Melly was hit with a new charge in his case. The state filed a new charge of witness tampering against the Florida rapper. Prosecutors were set to depose Brianna Hamilton, the ex-girlfriend of Cortland Henry, but Hamilton didn't show up the day of her scheduled deposition. The state says Melly told Bortland to keep Hamilton away from court. Only a few months later, the retrial would be delayed yet again as prosecutors sought to introduce lyrics from more than 55 of Melly's songs, including his biggest hit, Murder on My Mind. While prosecutors argue the lyrics would provide insight into his mindset, his defense argued the lyrics are not relevant to the case. And at this time, the judge has not yet issued a ruling on whether these lyrics will be admitted. YNW Melly is due back in court in December for a pretrial meeting in the witness tampering case. And both parties agreed to a hearing to respond to all pending motions on January 6th and 7th. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.